Oh, nuts. Well, I am really sorry that this picture is showing up on the screen. I've had multiple difficulties here tonight to try to get this underway. And right now I'm having some difficulty uh, getting the um, getting this picture that's up here out of your way. I'm going to try to do that if I can. Obviously, I can't. For some reason, I have um, a background picture up here that I did not want to have, and I apologize for that. I've had real issues. I lost the connection to be able to conduct this via audio and video. So my meeting was gone, and now I have a thing up here like I want to send an email, and I can't get rid of that. So I apologize for that. I hope that this won't cause you any problems. And we're going to talk tonight about the essential elements to be included in a strategic analysis. I'm not going to tell you in this conversation we're having, and I hope that you'll be able to see this tomorrow or later tonight. I'm not going to recommend to you what elements need to be included, but I am going to talk about elements that you normally find included in a oh, boy, I'm just having all kinds of problems here tonight. Doesn't want to help me whatsoever, one way or the other, and I can't seem to get rid of what I have on the screen here. Let me see if I can do that. Here, let's do that. Now, there we go. Some people will tell you I'm a little slow on technology. I guess that's true. So I wanted to ask you to determine what elements constitute a viable strategic analysis. In other words, what elements would you put into a strategic analysis? Say, this is what we've done, this is how we've done it, et cetera, et cetera. You may want to look at this and think of this in a way as an audit, although an audit is usually a little bit different. And an audit is something that you already have, and you're trying to figure out what needs to be there and what should be included and what shouldn't be included and things of that nature. Well, a strategic analysis is kind of a strategic plan, if you will, what you're going to determine how you're doing it. So what I want you to do here, or what you should do, and I'm going to say what I want you to do, what you should do here in this thing is not only to outline the elements that you think should be included, but explain why they should be included in an organization's strategic analysis. Now, I'm not asking for a lot of explanation, but you need to have a good idea of why you're including these things in the strategic analysis. What makes them important? Why should they be included? Why should we think about these elements in including them? So we know that any strategic analysis must include a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, you can, if you wish, not necessarily say, okay, these are the things that we found in strategic analysis, but you can say, based upon a strategic analysis, these are the things that we think are our strengths and weaknesses. These are things that are opportunities and threats. Here's how we move weaknesses to strengths, or we eliminate the weaknesses here's how we turn threats into opportunities. And we need to look at that last part in that fashion. One of the reasons is because the SWOT analysis, especially in the turning threats into opportunities, is the way it ought to be looked at. And that's environmental scanning, the external environmental scan. And too often, we humans look at threats as threats and say, well, okay, they are, and why, instead of why can't we turn these into something that's useful to us and for the organization? And so that's how we want to approach that. So the internal, let's start with the internal environment, the internal analysis. That should include or should cover finance, human resources, operations, information technology, and then mission, vision, and goals. The reason I mention it that way is the mission is most likely going to stay as is. The mission may be massaged a little bit to bring it in the current status, etc. But remember, we talked about mission statement last week, and we looked at Newport News Shipbuilding mission statements, which has been in existence since the late 1890s. It has not changed. And their mission statement was very simple. We build good ships. Hopefully at a profit. I don't have this exact, hopefully at a profit, at a loss if we must, but we build good ships regardless. So we may want to look at the mission and remind ourselves that everything we do has to be in sync with the mission. How does what we do, how do these things that we analyze to finance, human resources, etc., how do they support the mission? We're saying the mission has been set and the organization puts the mission out there to tell the general public, this is the businesses that we're in. There's several very interesting mission statements that we can talk about them for a long period of time. Harley-Davidson has one talking about the thrill of riding a motorcycle. And there are others. So mission statements don't have to be magic, that's my term. They need to say something. They need to tell the general public, this is the businesses that we're in. Pardon me, and this is what we intend to do. Okay, so we have the mission statement set. And then we probably want to review the vision, because remember, the vision tells the general public, or at least tells the organization, this is where we want to be in X number of years. And then we need to look at the goals, because the goals tell us how we're going to achieve the mission. These are things that we're trying to get to. And we don't look at objectives. We need to look at goals as being strategic, objectives as being tactical. We use objectives to meet the goals. And objectives tell us end results and how we achieve the goal. What did we do to get to the goal? How did we get there, et cetera, et cetera. So in essence, an organization is analyzing its various functions, some that I just mentioned, to determine where the company is at the present moment, and to use the results of the analysis to formulate the strategic plan, the roadmap, the way going forward. So we're going to look at some of these areas that I've mentioned. You may want to add some. And remember, if you do, there has to be a cogent reason as to why they're there. A financial analysis. And now remember, the financial analysis is going to be part of the strategic analysis. Examines, and each component or element that I mentioned here is part of the overall strategic analysis. These analyses can stand on their own for a particular department, but they have to be rolled up as part of the strategic analysis for the entire organization. And again, they have to match the organization's mission. So the financial analysis examines ratios used to determine an organization's profitability, return on investment, return on equity, earnings per share, and inventory turnover, among other items. Why are these things important? Well, it's pretty obvious about profitability. I mean, we know what that is. We also know perhaps what our return on investment is, or we can understand that fairly easily. Return on equity, we can understand that. Earnings per share, we can understand that. But why is inventory turnover important? Inventory is costly. We bring raw material in and we use it to make items, to produce something. And if we have too much inventory, this is inventory of raw material sitting on our shelves, then we're not, for a period of time, then we're not turning it over quickly enough, and it is costing us to store it. We have to pay utilities and perhaps security and a few other things to protect what we have, or to protect our investment in inventory. By the same token, if we have finished inventory, now that's finished product, but it's still inventory because we're counting it, we're holding it. If we have that sitting on our shelf too long, then obviously we're not making money. So this is the reason we do this type of thing. Without this data on these various little subject areas that I've talked about, which is turned into useful information, an organization will be guessing about its long-term financial health. All of these things put together talk about an organization's financial health. Can they be taken out of context? Absolutely, especially if you want to analyze a specific area of the overall operations and how it affects the finances. There may be a sticking point, there may be an issue among many issues, but this one particular issue is causing us problems. So yes, we want to do that. So that's why I'm saying, yeah, it can be taken out of context, but it has to be a holistic picture to give us an adequate and accurate snapshot of a company's finances at a particular time. While these ratios are useful, other financial information such as the capital budget, amount of debt, and cash flow must also be included. Table 12.1 on pages 367 through 369 provides detailed information on why these ratios are used and what they depict. So I invite you, because this is necessary for you when you start working the case studies, which will begin the week after next. This assignment is due next week, which will begin the week after next, and we can look and see exactly what needs, or how we approach the case study, how we look at a particular company, whether we can tell what the company is doing, standing still, moving forward, etc. The next topic area that I have, and by the way, my list is not all inclusive, so you may, again, as I said earlier, you may want to add things, but that's human resources. The text mentions a number of strategies for using human resources, employees, to achieve organizational goals. The major purpose for analyzing human resources as part of the strategic analysis is to answer the following questions. Now, again, the list that I have here is not exhaustive, and there may be other reasons that you want to analyze the human resources. And so this analysis should ask and answer questions of such as, do we have enough employees to achieve the organization's mission and goals? Does our area of operations, in other words, where we're physically located and the geographical surrounding area, have sufficient potential employees with the skills and educations required for us to do the job? And that job, of course, would be split into many various and sundry smaller jobs, supporting the much larger job? How will expansion, if we have that proposed, affect our ability to attract needed employees? What does that mean? Well, if we're going to expand, does that mean we're simply going to expand current operations because our production needs have increased, or our orders have increased, so we need increased production, we need to increase operations? Or does it mean that once we expand, that we need employees with different skill sets? It could mean both. And so we need to analyze that and get that into effect. Do we need to consider temporaries, contract workers, etc.? In other words, in this particular situation, if we have to expand operations to increase production, we're obviously going to need additional employees. Now, there are ways to accomplish that. You can have employees work overtime. There are pluses and minuses to that, which we don't need to go into. But let's say that we decide not to use overtime. We intend to use temporary employees. Are those the kind of people that we want? And what I mean by that is a temporary employee comes in, he or she works for an agency, so we only pay some of the compensation package. We don't pay all of it. Is that the way we want to go? Because now we're having a different skill set of people. We have to realize that temporary workers are exactly that. We may get to the point where we get them trained and they now have found a job someplace else. Do we intend to use contract workers? And we have to be very careful about that, because contract workers have to be treated exactly as it says, contract workers. The minute we start treating them as employees, they become employees. Now, don't somebody tell me that, well, hey, big government's not watching over here and we can do whatever we want. And that's what got Microsoft into trouble about using contract employees. Microsoft would have meetings for its employees and tell the contract workers, you have to attend the meeting. That is treating someone as an employee. And so we have to be careful about that. And we need to think about those things. Of course, employees, you could hire temporaries, we could hire temporaries, attempt to employment. We could bring contractors on with the possibility of becoming employees. But these are different categories. How does it fit within the scope of what we want to do? Will the organization be affected by an attempt to unionize employees? That tends to be a bugaboo today. And people don't like to hear about unions like they did some years ago. People look at unions as being an ugly duckling. They don't provide anything. They suck things out of their union, out of their members, and are anti-production and a few other things. Fact of the matter is that's probably not true, but that's the perception today. There are still some very large unions, and the unions have done a lot of giving back, especially when the automobile industry faced real economic problems about 6 or 7 years ago. So we need to think about that. But not having a union doesn't mean we're not going to have management labor disputes or management labor issues. And we have to think about those things. Our employee compensation package is designed to attract the right type of applicants. There are 3 ways to have a compensation package. And let's take that part of that out. Let's just talk about wages. There are 3 approaches. You can lag the market, you can meet the market, you can exceed the market. Now, some companies are very successful in lagging the market, and yet they provide a good compensation package and wind up having employees for the long haul. Then there are others that simply meet the markets, and others that exceed the market because they want to attract the best of the best. Does the organization have a diverse workforce? And how do we ensure that there is inclusion. Inclusion goes a step beyond diversity. Diversity simply means that we have a workforce with various traits and come from various cultures and creeds and nationalities and colors and both sexes and other type things. Inclusion, however, means that everyone has an equal opportunity to resources, promotion, et cetera, regardless of color, national origin, creed, gender, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How do we maintain an adequate workforce during an economic downturn? There has to be something there, and we need to have some kind of plan. And this analysis would look at the plan, a contingency plan, and say, well, yeah, it's adequate or it's not adequate. So that's what we're talking about here, because all companies would like to be hitting on every cylinder that they have, but we know that that's not feasible in the long run. There are going to be some twists and curves and bumps and detours, et cetera. So we need to think about that. That should be part of an analysis. Operations. This is the area in an organization concerned with production. Analysis should seek to answer the following questions. Is the operating equipment efficient? Now, I did not use the word sufficient because I'm going to assume that it is, but that may also be part of something we have to analyze. But the efficiency part is a greater concern. Why do I say that's a greater concern? Well, you could have two pieces of equipment and you'd say that's efficient, and yet neither one of those pieces in the production cycle are considered efficient. So perhaps the best thing to do is to find an efficient piece of equipment and discard the two old models that still produce, but they're not doing it efficiently. Are control systems doing what they're designed to do? For a long period of time in the United States, we had what was known as quality control. And the operating mantra at quality control was we had a couple of people at the end of the production line, maybe more, and they would pick up a piece of production, finished good, and say, well, it meets specifications, it doesn't meet specifications. Those that didn't meet specifications went in the scrap heap or the scrap barrel or whatever place where they were discarded. Now, that didn't do anything, because all that meant was you had produced, let's say, 100 widgets, and you found 95 of them didn't meet specifications, so you threw 5 widgets away, which means that you lost 5% of your production run. Now, if you have quality systems in place, you're measuring the quality and the control. You're controlling quality, you're controlling production, and you know what the limits are and the toleration, the tolerance, I should say, not toleration, the tolerance at which the pardon me, the goods have to be produced. Goods, this is the tolerance high and low, and as long as anything is within these upper and lower limits, it's okay. Of course, the closer together they are, the better, but regardless, as long as they are within the upper and lower limits, they're okay. But you want to find that out across the production spectrum, not at the end, so you can make changes as you go along. Controls may need to be adjusted, and that's what you're trying to do. That's what the purpose of this is. How is inventory managed? That brings us back to something we talked about before. I'm not going to address that too much again, but is it being managed? Are we turning it over? Are we making money? Are we losing money? On inventory, not on what we're selling, but on inventory. What is the quality of suppliers? And what's our relationship with suppliers? There's a mantra that's been around here for the last 10 or 15 years, maybe a little bit longer, known as just-in-time inventory. And what this is that you want the inventory that you need, the raw material for your production cycles, to be at your operations department when you need them. So they're not sitting on the shelf. I'm not going to use the term gathering dust, but so they're not sitting on the shelf tying up money. The only way you can assure that happens is to have a good relationship with a supplier who is a reputable supplier, and that supplier will deliver to you when you need the goods delivered or shortly there before. Obviously, you don't want to be in a position where you're running out, but you're going to have it there when you need it. You're not going to have it there before you need it. You're not going to be wasting money and inventory being tied up. So it requires not only a good supplier, that supplier provides quality raw material for you to turn it from input into output, but that your relationship with that supplier is good. Now, for instance, to give you an example of this, when Toyota wants to make a change to their cars, a change in production, not production, but a change in the way the automobile looks. They want to refine it, they want to add something, etc. They bring their suppliers in and sit down and talk with them and say, yeah, this is what we want to do. Is it feasible for you to help us do that? Now, I only use Toyota because I know that's what they do. Other companies may do the same. But that's really making sure that you have a good relationship with your supplier, and that the supplier is able to provide what you need when you need it. Not that you're going to throw a monkey wrench or a curve to the supplier once you decide to make a change in your product. Information technology. Not only is this area concerned with acquiring data, it must turn the data into useful information and then manage the retained information. We want to know here, do we have sufficient computer power? And are the computers we use up to date? Do we need to change the servers and things of that nature? Do we have adequate information storage space? That's always an issue. Does information flow properly? In other words, does it get to the right people where it's supposed to be, when it's supposed to be, et cetera, et cetera. Mission, vision, and goals. We talk about these a little bit more. We know the mission statement tells us the type of business an organization is, whereas the vision statement tells us where the company wants to be. Organizations' goals must align with the mission. If they don't align, they have to be changed. Mission probably is not going to change. Mission is most likely going to stay static. So we know that the mission's there to stay, the mission statement, but the goals can be changed. This part of the analysis will tell us whether or not the goals are in sync with the mission and whether or not they need to be changed. I'm kind of repeating myself here, and I may not have made my note exactly correct, but it does bear repeating. Mission statement probably is not going to change, but the goals may change. And the goals are not in sync or not aligned with the mission, then obviously they do need to be changed. Now, you may want to include other elements in the internal scanning and internal environment, checking the internal, analyzing the internal environment. The next major area is scanning the external environment. Remember, we go back to the SWOT analysis, strengths and weaknesses. Those are usually found, almost always found, within the internal environment, because those are things that we can have direct impact on. We can change if we need to. The external environment are the opportunities and threats. We don't have direct control over those. We can influence them, but we don't have direct control over them. Such things as the external environment. We talked about climate change last week. We didn't dwell too much on government regulation. We didn't dwell too much on taxation, if we did at all. We didn't dwell on transportation. We didn't dwell on infrastructure and things of that nature. We can influence, businesses can influence those, organizations can influence those by talking to their representatives or senators, by starting focus groups, by letter writing, by a number of things besides giving money to campaigns. And so they can try to influence them, but they cannot control them. Those are from someplace outside. Now, this includes obtaining and analyzing information about your competitors. We need to know what they are, what they're about, etc. Some we know, some we don't know. And I'm not talking about nefarious means here of getting information, like hacking into their databases, etc. Although I'm not going to tell you that's not done. But I'm not talking about that. A lot of information is public information, especially a publicly traded company. It has to provide financial statements to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Another element is known as benchmarking. That is selecting the best company in your industry and determining how well your company stacks up against this dominant organization. Across the board, maybe in specific areas, et cetera, et cetera. So that's used as a benchmark. This is the epitome of our industry. This is where we want to be. This is what we aspire to be. And so we look at what they do well, and then see how we're doing those things. Are there areas to improve, et cetera? Review Michael Porter's industrial competition model on page 110 in the text. Note that his model includes potential new entrants. This is something that every company has to be concerned about, especially companies in the technology business. Apple has to be concerned about somebody coming up with something better than the latest smartphone or iPad or iMac. And I'll be dating myself, pardon me, a little bit in talking about that type of technology. But they have to be concerned about that, because the last thing Apple wants to do is to lose market share. And this is something a lot of companies have issues with. There's an old story. I'm not sure how true it is, but one of the ways that Microsoft stays in the position that's in is not so much by, pardon me, by new innovation, but buying up competitors. And so now it brings that technology, that information, that expertise into the Microsoft world, and is not worried about that competition now for a period of time. It is looking at people who are hungrier and leaner and meaner, or companies that are, and finding out how well they're going to do. Suppliers, we talked a little bit about suppliers before, but this is making sure that, again, that you develop a good relationship with suppliers. Suppliers can do a lot more of controlling the market because they have the goods that you want. So relationships with suppliers is paramount. Buyers is another thing. Think of buyers as with the power of the purse. Buyers will tell you, the manufacturer, exactly what you can sell your product for. Now you think, well, wait a minute, that's not true. Well, yes, it is true. Let's say you make a t-shirt, and it's a special type of t-shirt, and you want to sell it for $40. and that's based upon raw material and workmanship and operations and all sorts of other things. And so you send it out to your vendors or whatever, your people that buy wholesale from you and sell retail, and they don't sell. And then one of your vendors, wholesalers, said, "Oh, wait a minute, maybe we can sell this shirt for $35." And now, of course, you know you're. I used a bad analogy here. let's take the wholesaler out of that. Your direct marketing will sell for $40, and I'll get back to the wholesaler. And nobody wants to buy it, or you do sell a few, but you don't sell enough to make money. So somebody said, well, maybe we could consider selling them for $35 and reduce the amount of profit. Somebody counters and said, well, no, wait a minute, let's not make it $35. Let's make it $37.50 and see what happens. So you put them on the market for $37.50 and you sell a few more, but not as many as you like. And then you move it down to $35 and you start selling a lot of them. So the buyer is obviously plural, have told you what your price is going to be. You may not like that, but that's what they've done. Stakeholders. Now here we need to think of stakeholders as other than stockholders, or other stakeholders besides stockholders. The government. This is the area in which you do operations. This again is your suppliers. It's your employees. It's a whole number of people that make up stakeholders, and they can influence what you do and how you do it. And remember, those people are outside. They're in the outside environment. And so you cannot control that. You can influence it or try to influence it, but you can't control it. So you have to be careful about that. And finally, we want to talk about substitutes. You could look at these as generic goods or knockoff brands. Of course, knockoff brands are illegal, but we could look at generic goods or store brands or something like that. How much does that impact what you can sell? Is the substitute a viable product? Will people actually buy the substitute as opposed to buying your product? So those are the things that you have to think about. I'll give you an example. I eat oatmeal for breakfast most days. I like hot oatmeal. I like it ever since I've been a kid. And I don't buy Quaker Oats, which is the probably the standard in the industry. I don't buy Quaker Oats because the store brand that I buy, I think, is pretty comparable. I can't determine the difference in taste well enough to say, no, I'm going to spend the extra money for Quaker Oats. Now, obviously, there are enough people buy Quaker Oats that that's not an issue for Quaker Oats. But a lot of people are like that, like me, that could say, well, let me try this store brand, or let me try this generic brand. And if it's good enough, if I can't notice a discernible difference, I'm going to do that. And if there's enough people to do that, that's going to cause the manufacturer to make some type of change that he or she may be unwilling to do. So we have to look at that. We have to consider that in the strategic analysis. This is going to cause us some issues. So those are things we need to look about. For instance, Apple. Who does Apple worry about? Well, obviously, Apple worries about Samsung because they're a huge competitor. And as you probably know, they've been suing each other right and left here for the last several years. It seems to me, if I remember correctly, Samsung has won some, but Apple has come out to be the bigger winner in the suits. And how much that infringes upon your cost and product and things of that nature is not determinable. But now here, let's think about this. What happens if a new company comes in and is able to offer some various and sundry things like Apple and Samsung does at a lesser price with as good a quality, and it appears that they have the resources, financial in this case, to stay in the market. that probably won't happen, but there's the potential is there. And so those are things that you need to consider in any type of strategic analysis. So I've spent about the last 35 or so minutes. I apologize for the technical issues I had this evening. One of them, the Snagit thing, was beyond my control. That's what we used uh, to record this. It just told me I got a message. Eventually, it said it's not working, and I can't control that. The email I probably could have fixed. I didn't realize I could fix it. So anyway, that's what's on tap for the next week. That I ask that you complete, and then we'll be back again next Monday with another lecture, and I believe we're going to be talking about chapters 4 and 5 next week. So I thank you for your attention, and good night.